The crystalline towers of Zephyria Prime gleamed under the twin suns, their surfaces reflecting the desperate evacuation ships streaming from the planet's surface. Commander Vexthera of the Galactic Defense Coalition watched through the viewport of her flagship as another transport vessel exploded in a brilliant flash of orange flame. The Devourers had found them again. "How many ships lost in the last cycle?" she asked her tactical officer, Lieutenant Mordun, whose 6 arms worked frantically across multiple control panels. 47 civilian transports, 12 escort frigates, and 3 cruisers, Mordun replied, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "The Devourers' void ships are tearing through our defenses like they're made of tissue paper." Vexthera's mandibles clicked in frustration. For 300 standard cycles, the Galactic Defense Coalition had been fighting a losing war against the Devourers, an ancient race of biomechanical horrors that consumed entire star systems. They arrived without warning, their living ships emerging from the dark spaces between galaxies like nightmares given form. Wherever they appeared, they left nothing behind but empty space and the screams of the dying echoing through subspace. The coalition consisted of 47 different species, each contributing their unique technologies and combat doctrines to the war effort. The aquatic Thalessi provided their quantum torpedo arrays, while the insectoid hivemind species contributed their numerical advantage and hive network tactical coordination. The energy-based Luminari offered their plasma weapons, and the rock-like granites brought their impenetrable armor technologies. Despite their combined efforts, they had never won a single major engagement against the Devourers. "Status report from the surface?" Vexthera demanded as another explosion lit up the darkness outside. "Archaeological Team 7 managed to transmit their findings before communication was cut," said Science Officer Keltheri, her crystalline features reflecting the emergency lighting. "They discovered something in the ancient ruins beneath the capital city. Pre-coalition artifacts, possibly dating back to the mythological period." Vexthera's interest sharpened. The mythological period referred to the time before the coalition's formation, when scattered legends spoke of a mysterious species called humans. According to ancient texts found on various worlds throughout the galaxy, these humans were described as bipedal creatures with incredible adaptability and a disturbing tendency toward violence. Most coalition scholars dismissed these stories as primitive folklore, created by early civilizations to explain natural disasters or unexplained phenomena. "What kind of artifacts?" Vexthera asked, even as another wave of Devourer attack craft screamed past the viewports. "Crystalline data cores, Commander." The archaeological team managed to decode partial information before the Devourers reached the surface. The translations mentioned something called a Terra Defense Protocol and coordinates to a system designated as Sol 3. The bridge shuddered as enemy fire found its mark on the port shields. Emergency klaxons blared, adding to the chaos of battle. Through the tactical displays, Vexthera could see the Devourers' massive bioships advancing in perfect formation. Each vessel was the size of a small moon, its surface covered in writhing tentacles and pulsing organic cannons that fired streams of corrosive plasma. "Sol 3, Vexthera repeated thoughtfully. "I've never heard of that designation. According to the ancient star charts, it's in the outer rim, approximately 47,000 light cycles from here," Keltheri reported, her voice barely audible over the sound of battle. "The system contains a yellow star and several planets. The third planet matches the mythological descriptions of the human homeworld." Another massive explosion rocked the ship. The main tactical display flickered and died, replaced by emergency backup systems. Lieutenant Mordun's expression was grim as he reported the latest casualty figures. "We've lost 60% of our fleet, Commander. The evacuation ships won't make it to the jump point. The Devourers are moving to intercept." Vexthera closed her eyes and made a decision that would have seemed insane to any rational military commander. The myths spoke of humans as warriors of incredible ferocity, beings who had fought wars across their homeworld for thousands of cycles. If even half the stories were true, they might possess the combat knowledge the coalition desperately needed. "Prepare the fastest ship in the fleet for a reconnaissance mission," she ordered. "I want a small crew, minimal signatures, and enough supplies for a long-range journey." "Commander?" Mordun's 6 arms paused over his controls. "We're needed here." The evacuation is doomed," Vexthera said bluntly. "We've tried conventional tactics, superior numbers, and combined technologies. Nothing works against the Devourers. If there's even the slightest chance that these mythical humans exist," and can help us. We have to take it. The ship lurched violently as a devourer bioship's tentacle lashed against the hull. Through the cracks in the main viewport, acidic bioplasma began to seep in, eating through the reinforced crystalline structure. The bridge crew worked frantically to seal the breach, but everyone knew it was only a matter of time. Kelthari, gather the archaeological data and prepare it for transport, Vexthara commanded. More done, select a crew of volunteers for the reconnaissance mission. Tell them they probably won't be coming back. As her orders were carried out, Vexthara watched the death of another coalition world through the damaged viewport. The Devourers were systematically destroying every structure on the planet's surface, their bioships extending massive feeding tentacles to consume the raw materials. Soon, Zephyria Prime would be nothing more than a barren rock drifting through space. The reconnaissance ship Stellar Wind was prepared in record time. Captain Jormalik, a veteran pilot from the warrior species known as the Blade Dancers, volunteered to lead the mission despite the astronomical odds against success. His crew consisted of Navigator Xenos from the Cerebral Thoughtwalkers, Engineer Patchwork from the Cybernetic Gearheads, and Communications Specialist Humera from the Empathic Harmonizingers. The journey to Sol 3 will take approximately 26 standard cycles using maximum slipstream velocity, Navigator Xenos reported as the crew made final preparations. Assuming the coordinates are accurate, and the system still exists, and assuming these humans aren't just mythological constructs created by primitive civilizations to explain their own violent tendencies, Engineer Patchwork added, his mechanical limbs adjusting the ship's power distribution systems. Captain Jormalik performed the ritual combat stance of his people, a series of fluid movements that honored ancestors and prepared warriors for battle. Whether they're real or not, we have our orders. The Coalition needs every advantage we can find. The Stellar Wind launched just as the main Coalition fleet began its final retreat from Zephyria Prime. Vexthara watched from the bridge of her crippled flagship as the small reconnaissance vessel disappeared into slipstream space, carrying with it the Coalition's last desperate hope. Behind them, the Devourers continued their methodical destruction of the planet. Their bioships worked with terrifying efficiency, stripping away the atmosphere and consuming the mineral wealth beneath. In their wake, they left only empty space and the echoing silence of another dead world. As her own ship limped toward the emergency rally point, Vexthara couldn't shake the feeling that she had just sent 4 brave souls on a futile quest for fairy tales and legends. The ancient texts spoke of humans as creatures of impossible contradictions, capable of both incredible compassion and unimaginable brutality. They were described as beings who could adapt to any environment and overcome any obstacle through sheer determination and ingenuity. But myths were just stories told to comfort civilizations facing the unknown darkness. And the darkness approaching the Coalition was very real indeed. The Stellar Wind raced through slipstream space toward a destination that might not exist, carrying the hopes of a dying civilization and the fragments of ancient legends that spoke of warriors from a mythical world called Earth. Whether those legends held any truth would determine the fate of 47 species and countless billions of lives. In the depths of space, the Devourers continued their inexorable advance toward the core worlds of the Coalition, unaware that somewhere in the vast darkness ahead, something was stirring. Something that had been waiting patiently for the galaxy to discover what it meant when humans went to war. 23 cycles into their journey through slipstream space, the crew of the Stellar Wind began to question whether they were chasing shadows across the galaxy. The coordinates from the ancient Zephyrian artifacts had led them through 17 different star systems, each one empty of intelligent life. Dead worlds and gas giants rotated silently around their stars, showing no signs of the mythical human civilization. Navigational sensors are picking up the target system, announced Xenos, his pale blue skin glowing as neural pathways fired beneath the surface. Sol 3 should be there. Captain Jormalik studied the tactical display with growing amazement. The system contained 9 planets orbiting a stable yellow star, exactly as described in the ancient texts. But what caught his attention were the artificial structures throughout the system. Massive space stations orbited several planets, and the asteroid belt between the 4th and 5th planets showed clear signs of extensive mining operations. I'm detecting electromagnetic signatures consistent with advanced technology, reported Engineer Patchwork, his mechanical augmentations interfacing directly with the ship's sensor array. Multiple planets show artificial lighting patterns on their dark sides, This civilization is not only real, it's thriving. Communications specialist Hamera suddenly straightened in her chair, her empathic abilities detecting something the sensors couldn't. Captain, I'm sensing presence. Massive presence. There are billions of conscious minds in this system, but there's something else. Something watching us. Before anyone could respond, the ship's proximity alarms began screaming. On the main display, dozens of contacts appeared seemingly from nowhere, surrounding the stellar wind in perfect formation. The vessels were unlike anything in Coalition records, sleek, angular designs that seemed to blend organic curves with mechanical precision. Their hulls gleamed with a dark metallic finish that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Fleet," came a voice through the communication system, speaking in perfect Coalition standard. "You are in violation of Sol System restricted space. Identify yourself and state your purpose, or we will consider you a hostile contact." The crew exchanged astonished glances. Not only were the legendary humans real, but they knew Coalition standard and possessed a military force capable of surrounding the Coalition's fastest reconnaissance ship without being detected. Captain Jormalik activated the communication system, performing the traditional blade dancer greeting gesture even though the recipients couldn't see it. "This is Captain Jormalik of the Galactic Defense Coalition vessel Stellar Wind. We come seeking the aid of the people called humans in a matter of galactic survival." A long pause followed. When the human admiral spoke again, her voice carried a weight of ancient sadness. "Coalition, we haven't heard that designation in nearly 300 years. Stand by for escort to Luna Station. Be advised that any aggressive action will result in immediate termination." The human ships moved with fluid precision, forming an escort formation around the stellar wind. As they approached the system's third planet, the Coalition crew marveled at what they saw. Earth was a blue and green jewel floating in space, its surface covered with lights that spoke of a vast civilization. Massive orbital installations ringed the planet, and the moon hosted a station that dwarfed anything in Coalition space. "How did our ancestors miss this?" whispered navigators in OS. "This level of technology, they should have been galactic powers 3 centuries ago." "Perhaps," said Captain Jormalik thoughtfully, "they chose not to be." Luna Station was a marvel of engineering that defied Coalition understanding of physics. The structure seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its corridors bending and folding in ways that hurt to contemplate. The artificial gravity was perfectly calibrated, and the atmosphere was breathable for most oxygen-breathing species. Admiral Sarah Chun met them in a conference room that overlooked Earth through massive transparent barriers. She was tall for a human, with graying hair and eyes that spoke of battles fought and victories won at terrible cost. Her uniform bore symbols and decorations that the Coalition crew didn't recognize, but the bearing of a veteran warrior was unmistakable. 300 years, she said without preamble. That's how long it's been since we received the last transmission from Coalition space. The final message spoke of a new threat emerging from dark space between galaxies. Bioships. Consumption fleets. We've been preparing ever since. Captain Jormalik felt a chill run through his spine. "You've been preparing for the Devourers for 3 centuries? How did you know?" Admiral Chun activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy in stunning detail. Red markers indicated systems that had been consumed by the Devourers, while blue markers showed Coalition strongholds. The pattern was clear. The Devourers were systematically consuming their way toward the galactic core. Human exploration fleets encountered the Devourers 280 years ago in the Andromeda Galaxy, Admiral Chun explained. "We lost 17 colony worlds and for fleet battle groups before we understood what we were facing. The survivors brought back intelligence about their capabilities, their technology, and their ultimate goal." "What is their ultimate goal?" asked communications specialist Hamera, her empathic abilities picking up currents of determination and barely controlled rage from the human admiral. "Complete consumption of all organic and technological matter in the universe," Admiral Chun replied matter-of-factly. "They're not conquerors or colonizers. They're a form of cosmic cancer that spreads from galaxy to galaxy, leaving nothing behind but empty space. According to our xenobiologists, they've been doing this for millions of years." Engineer Patchwork's mechanical limbs twitched nervously. "If you've known about them for nearly 3 centuries, why didn't you warn the Coalition? Why didn't you help?" Admiral Chin's expression hardened. "We tried. We sent warning messages, offered technological assistance, and proposed joint military operations. The coalition leadership dismissed our evidence as human warmongering and accused us of attempting to manipulate galactic politics for our own benefit. The conference room fell silent as the implications sank in. The coalition had not only ignored warnings about the greatest threat in galactic history, but had actively rejected assistance from the one species that had actual experience fighting the Devourers. "So you isolated yourselves?" Captain Jormalik said slowly. "We withdrew to Sol System and began preparing for the inevitable," Admiral Chen confirmed. "We knew the Devourers would eventually reach coalition space, and when they did, the survivors would come looking for help. We've spent 3 centuries building the military force necessary to fight them." She gestured, and the holographic display changed to show the Sol System in real time. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter had been completely transformed into a massive shipyard complex. Thousands of vessels moved through the construction zones, ranging from single-person fighters to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in coalition service. The Terran Defense Fleet currently consists of 40,000 combat vessels, ranging from stealth reconnaissance ships to planet-killer battleships, Admiral Chen continued. "We've also developed new weapons technologies specifically designed to combat the Devourer's biotechnology." Navigator Xenos studied the display with growing amazement. 40,000 ships? The entire coalition fleet at its peak was only 12,000 vessels. The coalition was built on the assumption that different species could contribute their specialties to create a combined force greater than the sum of its parts, Admiral Chen observed. That philosophy works well for conventional warfare between technological civilizations. It doesn't work against an enemy that treats your technology as food. She activated another section of the display, showing detailed schematics of Devourer bioships. The images were far more detailed than anything in Coalition intelligence files, clearly based on extensive combat experience and captured specimens. Devourer biotechnology is completely organic, but it operates on principles that conventional physics can barely explain, Admiral Chen explained. Their ships regenerate damage by consuming available matter, including the wreckage of destroyed enemy vessels. Their weapons are actually living organisms that can adapt to different defensive systems in real time. Captain Jormalik felt his warrior instincts responding to the detailed tactical information. How do you fight an enemy that can adapt to your weapons and use your own destroyed ships to repair itself? Admiral Chen smiled for the first time since the meeting began, and the expression was distinctly predatory. You hit them harder and faster than they can adapt. You use weapons they've never encountered before, and you make sure that when they try to consume your technology, they get a very unpleasant surprise. The holographic display shifted again, showing human weapon systems that seemed to operate on completely different principles from coalition technology. Instead of energy weapons or kinetic projectiles, the human arsenal appeared to focus on exotic matter manipulation, dimensional distortion, and something labeled as quantum cascade weapons. We've also learned something about the Devourers that the coalition never discovered, Admiral Chen continued. They're not a naturally evolved species. They were created as a weapon by a civilization that existed before the current galactic cycle. According to the ancient records we've uncovered, they were designed to consume all technological civilizations and reset the galaxy to a primitive state. Engineer Patchwork processed this information through his cybernetic implants, a weapon that outlived its creators and continued to function according to its original programming. But who would create such a thing? A dying civilization that decided if they couldn't survive, no one else should either, Admiral Chen said grimly. We call them the predecessors. They've been extinct for 2 million years, but their final weapon continues to carry out their last command. Communications specialist Humera suddenly gasped, her empathic abilities picking up something new. Admiral, I'm detecting a massive emotional response from Earth. Fear, determination, and excitement. Admiral Chen nodded. Word of your arrival has spread throughout the defense fleet. Our crews have been training for 3 centuries to fight the Devourers, but this is the first time we've received confirmation that the war has finally reached coalition space. They know it's time to put our preparations to the test. She stood and walked to the massive viewing port, gazing down at the blue and green world below. The human species has a saying, Captain Jormalik. Speak softly and carry a big stick. We've been carrying a very big stick for 300 years, waiting for the right moment to use it. Captain Jormalik joined her at the viewing port, watching the lights of human civilization twinkling on the planet's night side. Will you help us? Will you join the fight against the Devourers? Admiral Chun turned to face him, and her eyes held the cold fire of a warrior ready for battle. Captain, we didn't spend 3 centuries preparing to hide in Sol System while the galaxy burns. The Terran Defense Fleet launches in 72 hours. It's time to remind the universe why humans were once considered mythical beings of war. As the Coalition crew prepared to return to their ship with news that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization, they had no idea that throughout human space, massive fleets were already moving into position. The mythical warriors of ancient legend were about to become a very real force on the battlefield, and the Devourers were about to discover what happened when humanity went to war. The Battle of Kepler's Gate would be remembered as the moment when the tide of war turned against the Devourers. Commander Vexthera stood on the bridge of her rebuilt flagship, the Coalition's Vengeance, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history prepared for battle. 2 weeks had passed since the Stellar Wind had returned from Sol System with news that changed everything, and the transformation of Coalition strategy had been swift and brutal. Fleet status report, Vexthera commanded, her mandibles clicking with nervous energy. 8,000 Coalition vessels in fighting formation, reported her new tactical officer. The human Terran Defense Fleet has arrived with 26,000 ships. Combined fleet strength is now 34,000 vessels. The numbers still seemed impossible. The Coalition had never been able to field more than 5,000 ships at any single engagement, and they had never won a major battle against the Devourers. Now, with human reinforcement, they were about to engage the largest Devourer fleet ever assembled, over 100 bioships, each the size of a small moon. Incoming transmission from Admiral Chun, announced the communications officer. The main display activated, showing Admiral Sarah Chun on the bridge of her flagship, the TDF Retribution. Behind her, Vexthera could see human crew members moving with calm efficiency, their faces displaying the kind of confidence that came from superior training and overwhelming firepower. Commander Vexthera, are your forces ready for the engagement? Admiral Chun asked. As ready as we can be, Vexthera replied. Your tactical briefing was enlightening. I've never seen weapons capable of doing what you described. Admiral Chun smiled grimly. The Devourers consume conventional matter and energy to fuel their regeneration. Our weapons don't use conventional matter or energy. They'll find our technology much harder to digest. Through the tactical displays, both commanders could see the approaching Devourer fleet. The massive bioships moved in perfect formation, their surfaces writhing with organic weapons and feeding appendages. Each vessel pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly, and the space around them seemed to distort as their gravitational manipulation systems prepared for battle. Remember the battle plan, Admiral Chun continued. Coalition forces engage the outer defensive screen while TDF units target the primary bioships. Do not attempt to capture Devourer technology or personnel. Everything they produce is designed to corrupt and consume anything it comes into contact with. Vexthera had studied the human tactical doctrine during the past 2 weeks, and it had revolutionized her understanding of warfare. Where Coalition strategy focused on minimizing casualties and preserving resources, human strategy focused on achieving decisive victory regardless of cost. They had spent 3 centuries designing weapons and tactics specifically to kill Devourers, and their approach was ruthlessly efficient. All Coalition vessels, this is Commander Vexthera, she broadcast to her fleet. Today we fight alongside legends. Today we reclaim our galaxy. All ships, advance to combat range, and prepare to engage. The combined fleet moved forward in a formation that would have been impossible to coordinate without human tactical coordination systems. Coalition vessels formed the outer engagement zones, their quantum torpedoes and plasma cannons ready to engage the smaller Devourer attack craft. Behind them, the massive human dreadnoughts advanced in perfect formation, their exotic weapon systems charging for the first salvo. Devourer fleet is within weapons range, reported the tactical officer. They're launching attack craft. The space between the fleets filled with smaller Devourer organisms, living fighters that moved like schools of predatory fish through vacuum. Each one was the size of a Coalition fighter craft, but possessed no mechanical components whatsoever. They moved by manipulating local space-time, and their weapons were concentrated streams of digestive enzymes that could dissolve any known material. Coalition fighters, engage the attack craft, Admiral Chun commanded. TDF forces, begin primary bombardment. What followed redefined the concept of space combat. Human weapons didn't fire conventional projectiles or energy beams. Instead, they manipulated the fundamental forces of reality itself. Quantum cascade weapons created chain reactions in the molecular structure of enemy vessels, causing them to literally fall apart at the atomic level. Dimensional distortion cannons folded space around their targets, crushing them into impossibly small points before releasing them as expanding clouds of elementary particles. The Devourer bioships, which had seemed invincible against Coalition technology, began dying in ways that defied comprehension. Their regenerative abilities, which normally allowed them to recover from any damage by consuming available matter, became useless against weapons that destroyed them at the quantum level. Target the primary bioship in the center formation, Admiral Chun ordered. All TDF dreadnoughts, focus fire. The flagship of the Devourer fleet was a creature of living nightmare, its surface covered in thousands of feeding tentacles and weapon organisms. It had personally consumed 3 Coalition worlds, and its biomass had grown to nearly planetary proportions. When the concentrated fire of 20 human dreadnoughts struck it simultaneously, the effect was spectacular. Reality twisted around the massive bioship as quantum cascade reactions spread through its living tissue. The creature's attempts to regenerate were countered by dimensional distortions that prevented its cellular structures from maintaining coherence. Within minutes, something that had taken decades to grow and had destroyed countless civilizations was reduced to scattered atoms drifting through space. Impossible, breathed Vexthara's tactical officer. They killed a primary bioship in less than 5 minutes. Not killed, Admiral Chun corrected over the communication channel. Deleted. Our weapons don't leave anything for them to regenerate from. The battle continued for 6 hours, but the outcome was never in doubt after the first human salvo. Devourer bioships that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries were systematically destroyed by weapons they couldn't adapt to or consume. The smaller attack craft found themselves outmatched by Coalition fighters now protected by human defensive systems that made them effectively invulnerable to bioweapon attacks. Final Devourer vessel destroyed, reported the tactical officer. Fleet casualties. Coalition forces lost 430 vessels. Human forces lost 0 vessels. Vexthara stared at the casualty report in amazement. In every previous engagement, the Coalition had lost at least 70% of their forces while destroying perhaps 1 or 2 Devourer ships. Now they had annihilated an entire Devourer fleet while suffering minimal losses. How? She asked Admiral Chun. How did you achieve such overwhelming superiority? Admiral Chin's expression grew thoughtful. 3 centuries of focused preparation, Commander. We studied every aspect of Devourer technology and biology. We developed countermeasures for every weapon system they possessed. Most importantly, we accepted that conventional military doctrine was useless against an enemy that operated outside conventional physics. She paused, gazing out at the debris field that had once been the most feared fleet in galactic history. But there's another factor. The Devourers were created to fight civilizations that valued individual survival above victory. They were designed to exploit mercy, hesitation, and the desire to minimize casualties. Vexthara understood immediately, and humans don't hesitate. When the survival of our species is at stake, we do whatever is necessary to win, Admiral Chin confirmed. We spent 3 centuries accepting that this war would require us to become something terrible. When you're fighting an enemy that wants to consume everything that exists, there's no room for half measures. The combined fleets had already begun moving toward their next target, a Devourer staging area in the Rigel system where intelligence indicated they were preparing for a massive assault on the Coalition core worlds. With human tactical support and weapons technology, what had once been an impossible defensive war was becoming a systematic extermination campaign. Admiral, Vexthara said slowly, what happens when we've destroyed all the Devourers? What happens to humanity's war fleets when there are no more enemies to fight? Admiral Chun was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars while slowly past the main viewport. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 3 centuries of preparation for this moment. Commander, humans have been asking that question since we first learned to make weapons. We've always found new challenges, new frontiers, new ways to grow and evolve. When this war is over, we'll find something new to strive for. Perhaps we'll explore other galaxies. Perhaps we'll focus on building rather than destroying. Perhaps we'll discover what it means to live in a universe where our children don't have to be trained as warriors. She turned to face Vexthara directly. But that's a problem for tomorrow. Today, we have a war to win, and a galaxy to save. The Devourers have spent millions of years consuming civilizations. It's time they learn what happens when they try to consume humanity. As the combined fleets prepared for the next phase of their campaign, word of the victory at Kepler's Gate spread throughout Coalition space. On thousands of worlds, billions of beings who had lived in terror of the Devourers for 3 centuries learned that the tide of war had finally turned. The mythical warriors of ancient legend had returned to the galaxy, and they had brought with them weapons that could destroy nightmares. In the depths of space, scattered Devourer fleets received the news through their biotechnological communication networks. For the first time in their millions of years of existence, they experienced something new: uncertainty. They had encountered a force they couldn't consume, couldn't adapt to, and couldn't understand. The galaxy's most feared predators were about to discover what it felt like to become prey. The humans had come to war, and they had brought with them 3 centuries of preparation, weapons that operated outside conventional reality, and a simple message that would echo throughout the cosmos: no one devours humanity. Humanity devours back.